This is Doctor Talks, real talk from real doctors on the issues that matter to you most.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to this new episode of the Fasting and the Longevity Summit with Dr. Talks. This is your co-host, Dr. Joseph Anton, and I'm interviewing another co-host actually for the same summit, Dr. Jason Fung. And I'm not sure he needs an introduction, a very familiar face in the world of fasting and now getting into the world of longevity. But Dr. Fung, this is going to be a special episode with you as usual. Thank you for your time today. And I really look forward for this session with you.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Although you have millions of followers, maybe very few people around the world might not have, or around the world of longevity or fasting might not know you that well. So I want to make sure that we spend a few minutes on introducing yourself to anyone listening to us today, if you may do so.
Sure. So I'm a nephrologist, that's a kidney specialist, and I'm mostly clinical. And a few years ago, I started to get very interested in the question of diabetic kidney disease. And it occurred to me that really to prevent that from happening, you really had to reverse the type 2 diabetes. At the time, everybody was saying it's quite difficult, it's impossible, it's a chronic progressive disease. But at the same time, it was clearly not true because people who lost weight often reverse their disease. So I got very, very interested in the question of weight loss. And clearly the standard approach, which is to count your calories, didn't work. Everybody had tried it and it didn't work. And it was silly to keep saying that this is what works, when clearly it was what didn't work. And every single trial that's been done really in the history of nutritional science, just looking at calorie restriction has failed. Like nobody's able to maintain that weight loss long term. So I started thinking about other ways to think about weight loss. And one of the important factors that isn't really talked about so much is the hormonal changes that happen when you change your diet, because there are clearly very different things that happen in the body when you eat, say, a piece of brownie or cookie versus when you eat salmon or eggs, for example. So even though they're the same number of calories, the hormones that the body responds with are completely different. And to pretend that that's irrelevant for human physiology just flies in the face of common sense. So that's where I started to think about fasting, because fasting is is a way to really bring down the hormone insulin, which is one of the key hormones when you're talking about body weight. You know this because people who have a lot of insulin or take insulin, high doses, gain weight, and people who don't have enough insulin lose weight. So clearly it's a very, very important hormone for weight loss. And that's where I started to talk about it and think about it. And the more I read about fasting, the more beneficial it really seemed. And that's why I started to blog about it. And I wrote a couple of books about it, saying like, look, let's look at the science, let's look at the data. And a lot of people started to follow it and got tremendous results. And that's really one of the reasons why I'm here, is just because I really question the whole science of why at the time people said fasting was very bad for you, but in essence is actually very, very good for you for a number of reasons.
Thank you, Dr. Fong. And I think you were one of the early voices with Dr. Walter Longo and Nutra in general to start talking fasting to the world. There've been historically multiple waves of doctors who tried to bring fasting to the world in the early 20s, etc., but the science was not there, and it was kind of a little bit put down. I think today there's an aggregation of social influencers who have credibility like yourself, and they're key opinion leaders that have pushed they kind of have educated people on the value of intermittent fasting. The science coming from preclinical and clinical trials on multiple universities all came together to create this critical mass of trust and information and education that allowed a lot of people to pay attention to this topic and adopt it. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think that that's really where we are today, because social media allows people to sort of share what happens to them, so they don't no longer have to say just listen to their doctor, for example. And if the doctor doesn't know, then the patients don't get the benefits. And really people are able to find stuff online and try it for themselves. So the beauty of the whole, the information age is that it's not curated, in that people who find the information are able to act on it. And I what I did was try to put out sort of credible information, keeping to the science of it and how it can help people.
I'd like to explore with you to make this the very cost-effective interview from a time perspective and information perspective. Wanted to ask you, what do you feel are the top 3 or 4 benefits of fasting, and what do you want people to, if I'm new to fasting or I'm interested in fasting, what should I know and how should I start?
Sure. I think the top 3 or 4 things, sort of benefits, is that first of all, fasting has sort of a huge number of benefits, but it's very simple in its essence, right? That is, if you don't eat, your body is going to use the calories that it's stored away. The body stores away calories, food energy, in the form of fat and in the form of sugar. If you have too much stored sugar, you have type 2 diabetes. If you have too much stored fat, you have obesity. So all you're doing is you're allowing your body to use what's stored away. Just like if you went to the Costco and you bought a lot of food and you put it in the fridge. Well, why do you have to go to the grocery store every single day? You don't, because you can just go into your stored food, which is your refrigerator, and take it out and eat it, right? So the same thing on the body. If you have body fat and you don't eat, your body will take the calories out of your body fat and eat that for energy. Well, that's very good, because now you're going to get rid of some of the body fat and you didn't need to eat. So the whole idea, again, is very simple. You're using your body fat for precisely what it's there for. So there's nothing bad about it. In fact, it's very good. So the whole idea is that you can get these benefits in terms of, type 2 diabetes reversal, because you're using up the stored sugar, and weight loss, which is you're using up your stored fat. So those are the 2 main benefits. And if you get people to lose weight, there's actually tremendous health benefits, huge. And nobody really denies that. That's from, heart disease and strokes and cancer and, joint disease and back pain. And, the list goes on and on and on for the benefits of being able to lose some weight. In addition to the weight loss type 2 diabetes, there's a third sort of very interesting and new thing with fasting, which is autophagy, which is this idea that when you don't eat, you're going to switch your body into this sort of maintenance and repair mode. And you activate a process called autophagy, where your body eats itself. That's what the name means: auto, self, and phagine, which is eat. You eat yourself, and that sounds really bad. So people thought it was a terrible thing, but in fact, it's actually a very good thing, because if you think about how you rejuvenate your cells, what you got to do is you got to get rid of the old cells, then you got to grow your new ones. So what fasting does is it reduces all your nutrient sensors, that is insulin, IGF-1, mTOR, and at the same time pumps up your growth hormone. So then when you eat again, you're primed to rebuild those cells. So you're getting rid of old cells and you're rebuilding new cells, which is rejuvenation. People who talk about things like rapamycin, for example, which blocks mTOR, only affect one of those pathways. It affects mTOR, but it doesn't affect insulin-like growth factor, which I think, like IGF-1, which I think is a huge factor. It doesn't affect insulin, and it doesn't increase growth hormone. So you're getting so much less benefit from doing something such as rapamycin, which is funny, because then I see all these people talking about how great rapamycin is, and then saying, oh, well, you shouldn't fast, but you should take your rapamycin. It's like, well, that doesn't make any sense to me. You're getting so much more benefits in terms of longevity from fasting. Even people like David Sinclair, who's a great, sort of a rock star researcher in longevity. I mean, he talks about fasting all the time, because he realizes some of the benefits. I listened to an interview and he was saying, yeah, he does it himself all the time. And, he talks about these other longevity genes that get turned on, things like sirtuin and so on. So huge benefits. So not just your weight loss or type 2 diabetes reversal, but now more and more science behind autophagy, behind these activation of these longevity promoting genes.
Yeah, I think this is very important, because we build a society and we build medicine. I mean, it's interesting, you and I, 2 doctors, and we're saying, have always to listen to your doctor and come to something, we build a society where pill is a solution to everything. And you hinted at rapamycin. There's other, metformin, and there's spermidine now. I mean, there's a lot of GLP-1s, right? The biggest one today, the GLP-1s. There's a lot of the pill system. What I want listeners to understand is most of the time works on the receptor, on one receptor, which does a fractional thing and induces side effect when you overskew one receptor. And the beauty of fasting is such a not upstream intervention that actually allows the body in a natural way to cope with it, because our ancestors for hundreds of thousands of years had to go through periods of fasting and periods of food. So the body is built to deal with it, and is built to deal with it on an upstream intervention. So all these receptors, all the things, all the way from microbiome to the epigenetics, are all activated in a synchronized way, in a natural way, to do a positive defense mechanism, as you were explaining, rather than using a pill here to do that and then cover the side effect there and get a fractional. And we've seen it and we've heard it so many times, people saying you can get autophagy with this pill or that pill. I don't want to name them. The only product that was tested for autophagy in humans is Prolon, the 5-day fasting mimicking diet. And I've yet to see in a true randomized clinical trial other supplements showing that they can induce autophagy. We see it on their website, we see it on their claims, we never see it published and showing the rejuvenation. So this is an important message, that this is one of the natural way to get a lot of the benefits, that actually you got to add a metformin plus a rapamycin to close all that, shut down the receptors, and potentially a GLP-1 if you want to lose weight on top of that. All these three combines in an artificial chemical way with side effects maybe will get you the fraction of the benefits of fasting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, there may be other things that we haven't even discovered yet, right? It's the whole science of autophagy is relatively new. Even mTOR is relatively new science, and they're always discovering new things. However, when you're talking about treatments, then you go back to sort of like you want to go to the things that have been tried and, tested and really work. And fasting has been around for thousands of years. So, there may be more benefits that we simply don't know of yet, but certainly it makes sense that especially in these days where there's a lot of this problems with obesity, there's an epidemic of obesity, there's an epidemic of type 2 diabetes, those benefits are already huge. And, the side effects are going to be minimal as long as you do it in a sort of rational way, because people have done it for thousands of years. So it's like we know how to deal with it.
Yeah. And the second thing that amazes me as well is we've built such a circumvoluted system that we have to, when we talk to fasting, people are like, is that potentially believable? Is it skeptical? But we're saying if you overeat and now you're obese, and then with time and with aging you become diabetic, guess what's the solution? If you ask mainstream medicines like pills, which will never help you go off that. So you say if diabetes and prediabetes and obesity are the consequence of aging and overeating, this solution should be stop eating. It's like, how can, like, if somebody says, hey, every time I punch a wall, I have pain in my hand, you tell them stop punching, right? And then if somebody overeats and gets diabetic, the solution like naturally should be to
Yeah.
slow down your eat and or intermittently stop your eating. And that now is the least believable answer that we need to justify, whereas the entire system of a $600 billion diabetes management and all the medication and the dialysis machines and all of that is not helping any patient go backwards and getting cures. Fasting is hitting, I always call it the trio of diabetes, right? You mentioned the weight loss because that's the insulin resistance and the weight is the aging factor. Autophagy for the diabetic patients, we talk about autophagy for longevity, but autophagy for diabetic patients is as important because getting the system a little bit younger to better deal with it, deal with the health condition. And muscle protection, that's probably one of the myths that I know you are very passionate about. People saying, well, I don't want to do fasting, I'm going to lose muscle, I'm going to slow down my metabolic rate. Can you talk a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, so it's interesting because there was a very interesting study from one of the fasting clinics in Germany, the Buchinger Clinic, where they put people on a 10-day fast. So that's a pretty long fast. And they measured muscle mass by bioimpedance, which is basically like those scales. It shoots an electrical current through your body and measures fat because fat and lean tissue sort of are different in terms of the way they conduct electricity. That's how they calculate the body fat. The thing is, when you fast, you lose a lot of water as well, and you lose the muscles, lose glycogen because glycogen is a storage of energy. So glycogen is like a chain of glucose. The muscle has its own glycogen. So when you don't eat, the muscles are going to use energy. It's going to use glycogen. So you actually lose glycogen. So your muscles may actually get smaller, but that's not loss of muscle tissue. It's loss of muscle glycogen, which will be restored as soon as you eat. So the thing is that what they did was there's all these studies where you say, oh, if you fast, you lose muscle. And the numbers are like insane. Like I've seen studies where people fast for like 5 days or something and they'll lose like, 10 pounds of muscle mass. And it's like, okay, well, that's not really believable because, your muscles get stronger or weaker based on how much you use them, right? So if you exercise, you use it, you build more muscle. If you don't use your muscles like astronauts, or if you're bed bound, then you lose your muscle. So use it, it'll get stronger. Don't use it, it'll get weaker. So even if you use it and don't eat, they were saying that you're going to lose all this muscle mass. And then when you ate again, what happened was that all that muscle mass miraculously came back. So, okay, so when you fasted but kept the same activity, you lost all this muscle. When you ate but kept the same activity, you gained all this muscle. So how do you gain like 10 pounds of muscle without exercising? I'd love to know because I'd love to do it. It doesn't happen that way. You're just gaining and losing this muscle glycogen. So what the Buchinger Clinic did was that they tested not this bioimpedance, but they tested muscle strength. So they actually told them how to do reps and, grip strength and all this stuff. And what they showed was that, they looked at two different sets of muscles, the skeletal, like the axial muscles like that lift you up when you're standing and so on, and also the sort of grip strength and so on. And I think it was the grip strength or something. It actually, the strength did not decrease when you're fasting. In fact, one of the muscle groups, and I can't remember exactly which, went up by like 30% or something. Yeah. People were stronger when they're fasting. Why? Probably because of sympathetic tone and some of these other things. So I don't think they gained muscle, but
the
they
growth
were
hormone and the growth hormone pushing it makes sense when we didn't have food thousands of years ago. The body is saying, let me break down fat, ketones, let me increase the stress hormone and let's invest into the muscle so that we keep walking and finding the next fruit or vegetable. Otherwise, we're self-compromising ourselves. So the body under fasting wants to feed the brain with ketones to stay up and not faint, and wants to increase the tone for the muscle so you keep going and find the next fruit and vegetable rather than deplete the musculoskeletal system.
Exactly. So that's, to me, that makes a lot of sense. But yet you still have all these people out there saying, oh, fasting causes muscle loss. And it's like, why would your body be so stupid? Like, truly, like if you store energy, calories, in as a form of fat, right? That's what the body does. We all know that. But when you don't eat, your body's going to start burning down your muscle. So you're going to store fat and burn muscle. So in other words, it's like, storing firewood for the winter. And then when it gets cold, you chop up your sofa and throw it in. Like, you'd be stupid. Like, how do we survive as a species if we were just that stupid? And the problem is that there's not a lot of critical thinking sometimes. People just parrot this. There's a lot of bias and, against fasting because people, didn't think about it or do it. So they think, oh, it's new, so it must be wrong, sort of thing. And it was basically one of those issues where people latched on and said, oh, it must be this, it must be this. It was just like, for a while they're doing studies on fasting where they'd have somebody fast, 16 or 24 hours and then eat double. Like, why would you do that? Like, that's crazy. Like, clinically, and I think that's the thing, that these people were not clinicians. Clinically, you'd never do that. So sure, you're going to burn some energy when you're fasting, and then you're going to gain a lot of energy, which is calories, when you're not fasting. Like there's no magic in this. So it's like the same thing. People just didn't think clearly. They just thought, oh, well, the fasting itself is some kind of magic. It's not magic. You're letting your body use its body fats. That's it.
And glycogen, which is in the
And
muscle, which is what,
glycogen
yeah.
and yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, the good news is science is on the side of fasting, and I mean, I've personally shared with you a couple of articles that we tested on the fasting mimicking nutrition and muscle, and we have specifically went after young male athlete to show that even in that crowd who's very elastic and could lose a lot of muscle or win a lot of or gain a lot of muscle, we did a randomized clinical trial and we showed that you actually protect muscle performance and muscle function, as you mentioned, for those people who lose a little bit of on a standard, biometric measurement. If they see muscle decreasing in mass, that's not muscle cells, that's the glycogen, that's the storage. And if
Yeah.
anything, with the fasting mimicking diet, you're feeding muscle under a high growth hormone environment, and we're seeing a lot of actually sometimes much better performance. And that's a very important point because millions of people today are sacrificing their muscle with GLP-1s, with chronic dieting, chronic diet restriction, and the GLP-1s. And now, recently, we had a new trial last week showing bone density decrease. I mean, that's with the GLP-1s. So going back to the same story, I think a lot of people attack the natural ways that are effective. They want to sell you another drug or another way that they want to sell, and ends up being the long deprivation, as we know historically. And you started the session with saying it's difficult to comply and have long-term side effects, whereas fasting triggers that protection reaction, is a short-term feasible solution, and is the natural way that the body had to go through thousands of years of evolution.
Yeah, people always say stuff like, oh, well, maybe it works, but people will never do it. I'm like, did you tell people to do it? Because in the old days, people did it. When you told them, they did it. Like, you think it's easy to do chemotherapy? No, but you tell them to do it and they do it. Why? Because they need it for their treatment or surgery or whatever, all these dialysis, all these things that we do in medicine that are quite difficult, right? They're not easy things to do, but they know that it's good for them, so they do it. Same thing with fasting. It's like we don't tell them and then we assume that they can't do it. It's like, but you think that somebody will, go undergo triple bypass surgery. It's like, oh, they'll just cut them open, crack open their chest, this and that. It's like, that's a lot. But they'll do it because they know that it's good for them. And the doctors tells them it's good for them. Whereas we don't even tell people that's good for you. We just get this, oh, people won't do it. I'm like, God, like we underestimate, sometimes the medical profession just underestimates the intelligence of the average person, right? They think, oh, people are so stupid. Like it really is this very paternalistic sort of, well, we know it'll benefit them, but they won't do it. So we won't even talk about it. And it's like, come on, like you're not giving anybody the benefit of the knowledge. Just tell them what it is. If they don't do it, they don't do it. If they do it, good. Maybe they'll benefit.
Yeah.
It's quite striking sometimes.
It seems that they would prescribe $1,000 injection of GLP-1 agonists, right? And people are
Yeah.
injecting a biologic in their body and paying for it to lose and when you can do it in a much easier and natural way with the fasting, and whether it's intermittent or the prolonged one. I wanted to ask you, I know you recently wrote a book on cancer as well, and you became passionate about that topic. And I wanted to ask you if you had a little bit looked into the data of fasting and cancer or cancer treatment, and if that's the next horizon for potentially cancer treatment as well.
It's a very interesting topic, and it's a much more complex topic. So some people try and say, oh, it's just this or it's just that, like it's just genetics or it's just this or just that. It actually isn't. It's a very complex topic, and that's what the book was about, sort of complexity of it. However, the fasting does clearly have some benefits in terms of, the risk factors for cancer. So if you look at the risk factors for cancer, obesity is a very big one. In fact, diet obesity really are tied almost with tobacco smoking as cause of cancer. There's like 13 different types of cancer that are called by the World Health Organization obesity associated cancers. So it's not that it's not well known. Everybody knows it, agrees that it plays a role. So therefore, if you can lose weight, then and these include things like breast cancer, colorectal cancer, pancreatic cancer, very bad ones. And the thing is, if you know that that's a risk factor, then you can do something about it. Because if you lose the weight or cut the diabetes, reverse the diabetes, then presumably you're going to decrease the rate of cancers that happen. So it is, certainly one of the roles. And the question is, what role does it play? And that's where the research it's super, super early. I mean, there is a little bit of data. You've done several of the most, the most important studies showing that you can have effects on these cancer cells by nutrition. And the thing is that cancer cell metabolism is quite different than normal cell metabolism. So when you fast, you force your body to feed off body fat, basically. And the cancer cells can't do that nearly as well as a normal cell. So a normal cell will switch over and just use body fat as a source of energy, whereas the cancer cell can't. So there's a good chance that you're going to slow down the growth or even kill it by limiting the glucose that's available, because a lot of these cancer cells really need super high or really thrive in this super high glucose environment. Whereas when you fast, you get rid of the glucose because it's a short-term energy source and you're switching over to fat metabolism, and therefore you may impact cancer cells, cancer treatment. And the thing is that why not, right? It's like people always worry about this thing called cancer cachexia, but that's actually a very, very different disease. Nobody really knows what it is, but it's not calorie restriction. So the thing is, when you have cancer, your body the cancer actually breaks down your muscles and your fat to feed itself. That's not just simply normal weight loss. Normal weight loss doesn't happen like that. The muscles are protected and the fat gets broken down. So it's much different, and why that happens and what causes it. There's a lot more research to be done, but it's not a reason that early in the treatment you might not apply some of these factors, such as fasting, to reduce your risk of cancer. Once you have it, it's a much more difficult sort of thing to get around. You can use it along with chemotherapy, for example. You fast before the chemotherapy. That's very useful.
In wanted to ask you about lately. I saw your increased interest in the fasting mimicking technology. You and I spent years talking about that and watching and building the science and watching the results. A lot of people today are trying to fast with food, what we call fasting with food or fasting mimicking technology. Do you want a little bit give your perspective on it and
Yeah.
what your recommendations are on that as well?
Yeah, and this is where I've sort of changed my mind as more and more science comes out. And the thing is that there's two ways to do a longer fast. So if you're doing a short fast, like 16 hours, then there's not really any reason you have to take any food. Like your body can easily handle that. 20 hours, even 24 hours. But when you're going 5 days, for example, which is the L-Nutra is the 5 days, then there's two ways to do it. You could do water only, right? You could just have water and herbal tea, for example, no calories, 0 calories. And that is sort of the purest way to do it. And that's what I always thought was, good, because that's the purest way to do it. And so I did it. It's not particularly difficult, but it does take a little doing. However, a lot of science has come out where they don't do that. And in fact, there's actually very few studies on pure water fasts of that length. So if you look at your data has food, but it's a low amount of food. It's not like 2,000 calories. It's like 1,000 and sometimes down to 500. But there are other diets that have done that. 5-2 diet is also a type of fasting with food, because again, on the fasting day, you take food. A couple of the other studies that came out, they don't name them, but like they don't give a name to it. But they've also done, long fast, some of them 10 days, but again, with a bit of food. And the idea is that you don't need to turn down your insulin, IGF-1. You don't have to turn it all the way to zero. Maybe just turning it down most of the way is good enough and maybe better. But in either case, that's what all the studies have been, all the ones of past a certain length, right? Once you get past a day or so, you find very few studies where they just put 0 calories. So if that's where the science is heading, hey, I think that you can get most of the benefits by having a little bit of food during the long fast. Like I said, not necessarily, although the 5-2 diet, which Dr. Mosley had popularized, is a shorter fast with still with food, right? But he had great results. Like some of those studies are quite impressive on the 5-2 diet. And again, it's the other thing is that certain clinics, like the Buchinger clinic I mentioned in Germany, which has been around, I think, for like 100 years. It's been there a long time. And there's a fasting retreat. People go there and they stay there and they fast for 10 days. It too is not a full water only fast. They give you certain things like juices and all these other things. And you can quibble about whether you should take juice or not with all its fructose. That's not the point. The point is that it also doesn't do that, where they don't do a full water only fast for extended periods of time. So because the science has moved that way, and a lot of the traditional practice also, like these fasting clinics and so on, have moved that way, I've sort of thought, well, hey, if you get good results, who am I to argue? Like why would I argue with 100 years of clinical experience at the Buchinger Clinic or the studies that are all coming out now in terms of doing the longer fast with a little bit of food support? Like it actually, if I don't have the evidence to say that doing a water only long fast is better because that data actually just doesn't exist. So I can either go with what's proven, both historically, clinically, and in the studies, or I'd have to just say, well, I'm going to stick to my guns, be a purist,
Yeah.
but I actually have no good data behind me, either from a scientific standpoint or a clinical standpoint, because I haven't been practicing that long.
It's also the water, long days of only water fasting has a lot of positive that we talked about, but also starts getting into a lot of negatives, right? The body needs calories at the end of the day, needs minerals, needs vitamins, the normal operation of the body. The brain has to keep operating, the heart pumping, the kidney. It's too drastic. I always compare it to a company with no revenues, right? So yes, the CEO will restructure the company. That's autophagy. It's healthy, but at the same time, the best employees, they will leave because you cannot pay their salaries. So you cannot buy your ingredients to sell them the next month. You cannot do any marketing. So going sometimes very drastic on the body.
Yeah.
It's a set of homeostatic environment. Going so drastic sometimes is too much. So the fasting with food probably is mitigating that and is keeping the pressure on rejuvenating the cells, but actually nourishing the body to help it go through that phase.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that there's certainly a role for all of these sort of things. And if you're getting most of the benefits and making it, if you're getting like 90% of the benefits, but making it, 50% is hard, that's a net benefit. Like that really is. So that's why I've sort of changed my mind recently about, you know, that's what happens, right? When more science comes out, and it was clear that nobody was doing a study of water only fasting. So as the science sort of changes, understandings change, and hey, try it. I've started to have people do it sort of in this sort of modified way, and I'm seeing pretty much the same or better success even. So
Is it the Prolon 5 days?
the prolonged 5 days, yeah. So I've asked people, or I ask people just to sort of, if they don't want to buy it, then just to sort of follow the idea of it just on their own. And again, I don't see that it's much worse than the longer one. So again, I think that my own feeling is that you're getting the large majority of the benefit, but making it quite a bit easier. So because you're making the relative amount that you're making it easier is more than any sort of maybe benefits that you may lose. And that's again questionable. I don't know if you lose any benefits. I really don't. Like the studies are not there. Nobody's compared a 5-day water only to a 5-day sort of
We did
with
with the
food.
fast, yeah, we did only in animals, and in animals it was showing actually a little bit better in many instances. But
Yeah.
in humans, the reason why we don't see that, because a lot of the IRB boards, they say it's unethical to fast people this long, or it's unethical to do it when you have an alternative with food. So we wanted to compare fasting mimicking diet to water fast. But a lot of
Uh,
the boards call that this is, getting close to why to expose people to water fast this long when you have a better technology, or you can do it in a safer way. They think about safety for hypoglycemia, etc. And this is what we're seeing. I mean, in mice you can do anything, I mean, in that sense. So when we did water fasting versus the fasting mimicking diet or the prolon, we've seen better rejuvenation, especially stem cell regeneration in GI tract, because you're feeding the stem cell regeneration and you're keeping the right microbiome. Something we don't talk about with water fasting, you're depleting the entire microbiome. It's water, right? And when you do a plant-based fasting rejuvenation, you're actually helping the right bacteria. You're helping closing the leaky gut, and you're helping all the downstream benefits from that as well. So to conclude today, I wanted to ask you, what do you do for your longevity? Like Dr. Fung himself, whether it's fasting or other things, what do you do? How you eat, how you exercise? What do you do for your own health and wellness and longevity?
I mean, I try to stay away from sugar. I mean, I don't not eat sugar, but compared to sort of when I was 20, it's sort of like 90% less than what I used to eat in terms of sugar, right? I mean, when I was 20, I didn't really think about it. If it was tasted good, I ate it. So I do that, from a dietary standpoint, I do stay away from as much as I can from refined foods and sugar. And I think that's a lot of gets you a long way. So I don't not eat it, but it's just down from what I used to do quite a bit. And then I do the fasting. So I do sort of occasional long fast, like 5 days plus the shorter fast, often 16 hours and then sometimes 24 hours on a pretty regular basis. My longer fast, the last few times I've added some vegetables on like day 4, day 5 sort of thing with because of the same thing, right? The science has sort of shown it. And then the other thing, the other things are sort of common sense stuff that everybody should do. Exercise. I try to exercise, although I don't do as much as I really should, and trying to keep a community is important. Like some of these other people have talked about the importance of a sense of purpose, right? Because this is for your mental health. Having, friends, or, I've recently picked up tennis, which is not just good exercise. It's probably not as good exercise as running, which I also do, but it's much more social. So you're getting sort of, it's a game, it's more enjoyable, but you're also sort of hanging out and, so having a sense of people you can trust and a community around you and so on is actually quite important. I think that, when you look at a lot of these people who live a long time, they usually have these supportive people behind them. So that's what I tried to do, whereas before I did a lot of sort of running or solo stuff because, my time was limited. So if you want to get a lot of exercise in a short period of time, running's pretty good and weights are pretty good, but it's not very social because I ran by myself, right? So whereas things like tennis are actually much more, I think, something that you can enjoy for a long, long period of time. So those are the things. I mean, having that sort of, idea, it's not just the diet. It's not just the exercise. We all know you should follow a good diet, right? Cut out the junk food, cut out the the chips and the French fries and the sugar. Like that's not that controversial. Exercise, that's not that controversial. Like everybody knows you should do it. But it's a matter of some of these other things that are sort of coming to the forefront, which is community and so on. I know Dr. Dan Buettner talks about it in the Blue Zones and so on about the sense of community. I think he's absolutely right. I think the people who live the longest really have a sense of why they're here, whether it's taking care of your grandkids or, doing something like helping the world by volunteering, by, educating, which is something that, you and I do, and then having that community around you. Those sort of soft sort of things, I think actually wind up being just as important as the sort of what some people like to do. Oh, I eat this percent carbs and I fast for X number of hours. But the softer things like having friends, making sure you're connected to your family and stuff, that's probably just as important or more important. It's just hard to measure it.
Yep. No, fully agree. The social capital, I think it's nutrition, social capital are the top two, then exercise and stress and sleep. This is when we study the centenarians, this is what we observe. And social capital and happiness is the mother of all. When you're happy and well nested, you eat better, you sleep better, you stress less, and you exercise more. So
Yeah.
I fully agree with you on that concept. Dr. Fung, I want to thank you very much today for your time and the valuable information. Hopefully we change somebody's life today and inspire people to embark on the journey of fasting and longevity. Appreciate you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in to Doctor Talks. We hope today's episode has enlightened and inspired you on your path to optimal health. Each day is a new opportunity to make choices that empower your well-being. For more insights and strategies, subscribe to our podcast and visit our website, www.drtalks.com. Stay connected, stay healthy, and join us next time on Doctor Talks, real talks from real doctors on the issues that matter to you most.